Yo, welcome back to the channel. Today's deep dive is all about Dwayne The Rock Johnson, a man whose charisma and success are off the charts.
The Rock knows you have feelings for him.
And yet that same larger-than-life persona has earned him criticism from peers in WWE and Hollywood. From production delays on films to public callouts, we're exploring claims that he always needs to be the main guy, that his ego sometimes rubs others the wrong way, and that working with him isn't always smooth. We'll back everything up with real-life events, quotes, and sources. No fluff. And stay tuned. Some of this stuff might surprise you, even if you're a die-hard rock fan. When people talk about Dwayne The Rock Johnson, the conversation usually starts with admiration. He's one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, a WWE legend who carried the company during its hottest era, and someone who reinvented himself into a global icon. But beneath that polished image of charisma, motivational speeches, and billion-dollar box office returns lies a persistent critique that has followed him for years, an accusation from peers, co-stars, and even fans that Dwayne Johnson has a massive ego. Now, ego isn't always a dirty word. To climb to the very top of industries as cutthroat as professional wrestling and Hollywood, you almost have to believe in your own hype. You have to walk into a room convinced you're the main guy, the person who belongs in the spotlight. But with Johnson, the criticism goes further. He isn't just confident. His detractors argue he always needs to be the focal point, whether it's in WWE storylines, blockbuster films, or even interviews. And when things don't go his way, clashes tend to follow. Let's start with his wrestling career, because that's where this reputation was first forged. Back in WWE, The Rock was instantly larger than life. From the Attitude Era onward, he wasn't just part of the show, he was the show. Fellow wrestlers respected his charisma, but many also whispered about his tendency to position himself front and center. Fast forward to the modern era, and the criticism hasn't gone away. Take the drama around WrestleMania 41. Fans were furious when The Rock didn't appear as advertised, and his follow-up explanation on the Pat McAfee show poured gasoline on the fire. Instead of humbly bowing out, Johnson spoke as if he was the one who should have dictated WWE's biggest storyline, claiming he had ideas for how things should have gone. To fans and insiders, this sounded less like a humble legend stepping aside, and more like a megastar unwilling to admit he wasn't needed this time. The backlash was brutal. WWE fans filled social media with comments calling him shameless, arrogant, and incapable of handling criticism. Critics pointed out that in his statements, Johnson kept shifting the language from we to I, a subtle but telling choice. In an industry built on teamwork and creative collaboration, this reinforced the idea that Johnson sees himself as the main decision-maker, even when he's not running the show. Some fans even compared his attitude to CM Punk's infamous gripes about part-timers who swoop in, take the spotlight, and overshadow full-time talent.
I don't know if you're as good as Dwayne, though he's a pretty good ass kisser.
This perception isn't just fan fiction either. Insiders have fueled it as well. On Kevin Nash's Click. This podcast, Johnson's alleged on-set behavior was discussed in terms of top guy syndrome. Reports that he would regularly arrive late, or even resort to peeing in bottles to avoid taking breaks, were framed as behavior symptomatic of someone who believes rules don't apply to him. Johnson later brushed these stories off as exaggerated, but the narrative stuck. To some, he's a consummate professional. To others, he's the textbook example of a star who believes the machine exists to serve him. And WWE peers aren't the only ones making noise. Hollywood has its own stories about Johnson's need to dominate the spotlight. One of the most infamous examples comes from his time in the Fast and Furious franchise. In 2016, during the filming of The Fate of the Furious, Johnson shocked fans by posting a now legendary rant on Instagram. He praised the female cast and crew, but described some of his male co-stars as chicken shit and candy asses. The post sparked immediate speculation about who he was talking about. Most fingers pointed directly at Vin Diesel, the franchise's longtime face. Suddenly, the behind-the-scenes tension spilled into the public eye. The feud escalated into a years-long Cold War. Reports surfaced that Johnson and Diesel refused to shoot scenes together, and the chemistry of the film suffered for it. Johnson eventually spun off into his own franchise installment, Hobbs and Shaw, where he got to play the undeniable leading man. To some observers, this was a power move, The Rock splitting away because he couldn't share the spotlight with another alpha male. Even John Cena, who has worked closely with both men, described the situation diplomatically by saying it was simply two very alpha-driven people clashing. That phrasing may be polite, but it reinforces the point. When you put two egos the size of Diesel's and Johnson's in the same room, conflict is inevitable. Johnson himself has never shied away from the perception that he's the star of the show. In WWE, his 2024 return promo on Monday Night Raw included the line, "Should I sit at the head of the table?" a direct reference to Roman Reigns' character.
Should The Rock sit at the head of the table?
Even though Reigns was the dominant figure of that era, Johnson immediately positioned himself above him. Fans ate it up, but backstage it reportedly raised eyebrows. After all, Johnson has always understood how to blur the line between reality and character. And when his character claims he's the main guy, that usually means he believes it too. Even beyond these headline feuds, smaller cracks in Johnson's image have appeared. A 2024 report claimed that production delays on the holiday action comedy Red One cost upwards of $50 million, and that Johnson's lateness contributed to the chaos. He later admitted to occasional tardiness, and, bizarrely, confirmed he had urinated in bottles on set to save time, but dismissed the broader accusations as exaggerated. His co-star Chris Evans and director Jake Kasdan defended him, but the damage was done. Once again, Johnson was cast as a superstar whose ego allowed him to play by his own rules while everyone else waited. What makes this criticism sting is that it's not isolated. Over the years, a variety of outlets and commentators have described him as phony, egotistical, or self-absorbed. Writers have pointed out how he often records his charitable deeds for social media, suggesting that even his kindness has a performative layer. Fans debate whether this is just smart branding or evidence that he can't let a single action exist without reinforcing the image of Dwayne Johnson. Unstoppable hero, hardest worker in the room, the man on top. His relationships with WWE peers reflect this duality. Some, like Mick Foley, Chris Jericho, and Kurt Angle, have praised Johnson for being generous, putting others over, and losing matches when it made sense for the story. Others, like John Cena, openly criticized him for abandoning wrestling for Hollywood glory. Cena once accused him of not giving back to WWE and caring more about himself than the business. Later, Cena admitted he was being selfish and short-sighted, and the two men reconciled. But the fact that even Cena, someone who knows what it takes to stay at the top, saw Johnson as egotistical during that period shows that the criticism isn't entirely baseless. What's fascinating is that Johnson himself seems aware of this reputation, but he frames it as the cost of success. In interviews, he often talks about needing to outwork everyone and position himself as the hardest working man in the room. It's part of his brand. To him, ego is simply confidence and ambition. But to those working alongside him, it can feel suffocating. When someone always has to be in the main picture, others inevitably feel pushed to the side. And perhaps that's the paradox of Dwayne Johnson. On one hand, his career is proof of what unwavering self-belief can accomplish. On the other, his insistence on being the star has created friction in WWE locker rooms, alienated Hollywood co-stars, and earned him backlash from fans. He is the ultimate example of how ego can both make and break a public figure. Without it, he might never have transcended wrestling. With it, he often seems incapable of sharing the spotlight. So, does Dwayne Johnson really have a big ego? The evidence suggests yes, but the bigger question is whether that ego is a flaw or a necessary weapon. To climb as high as he has, you need to believe you're the main guy. But when everyone else in the room feels the same way, sparks are bound to fly. Johnson may insist he's about brotherhood and hard work, but the stories, the feuds, and the backlash all suggest a man who simply cannot exist without being in the center of attention. And in both wrestling and Hollywood, that can make you beloved, hated, or both at the same time. In the end, Johnson's ego is part of his legend. It's what fuels the inspirational speeches, the blockbuster roles, and the historic wrestling moments. But it's also what creates enemies, feuds, and critical headlines. Some will always see him as phony, shameless, or self-centered. Others will argue he's just playing the game better than anyone else. But one thing's for sure. In every arena he steps into, Dwayne Johnson will always demand to be the main guy. And for better or worse, that's exactly what he is.